Good morning, class. Welcome to Team Building 101. In today's video, we're going to cover training, scouting, player contracts, trades, and drafting. So let's begin. The key to building any type of dynasty in franchise mode is rather pretty simple. You need to be adamant about training, but before we can just hop in and simulate or manually do our training, we need to know what position groups and which players to target. What I like to do is get an average overall for each position groups. The position groups that you can target are quarterback, running backs, receivers, tight ends, offensive line, defensive line, linebackers, and defensive backs. For an example, you would take all the offensive linemen's overalls and you would add them together and then divide by 5, and that would be the average overall for your starting offensive line. I highly recommend having pen and paper and possibly a calculator, or you can just use your phone, honestly, and write these down on a sheet of paper, as that'll be critical when we get to the actual training screen when we need to figure out which drills we're going to run. Don't forget to adjust your coaching scheme. This affects how many players get bonuses for a scheme fit after every practice. You generally want to find the scheme that gives you the highest percentage. I will say I don't necessarily upgrade my players to fit this scheme, nor do I seek certain players that fit the scheme as shown on the screen. I have a unique play style and I want certain archetypes at each position, but feel free to do it however you want to do it. But just don't forget to adjust it so that your players get the maximum amount of XP after every practice. We're finally getting to the good stuff. So what I like to do for my focus players is find the 3 lowest overall starters on both sides of the ball. You can include fullback in that if you want to, but I don't include the fullback just so I can focus on positions that actually affect the simulation. Now we need to pick an offensive and defensive game plan. This doesn't just affect which position groups get trained, it also affects the effectiveness of plays that fall into those categories. I actually make sure that I get a gold, so I play it and get a gold, and then every week after that, you don't have to actually play it. You can just hit sim, and it'll give you the maximum XP that drill allows for those position groups. It's pretty neat. After you complete your training, you get to upgrade your players sometimes, and this is what I like to do. For quarterback, I do field general if it's a visual sim or a sim style league, but if I'm actually going to play the games, I prefer scrambler because I like to run around and make things happen because I'm terrible at reading defenses. For halfback, I do elusiveness and power. I don't really prefer to train receiving back. It's not really my thing. Fullback, I'll do blocking. Every now and then you'll see me do utility, but not too much. Receiver, I train all 4 styles on Madden 19. Tight end, vertical, and possession. The reason I don't train blocking is because they get run blocking upgrades in these 2 packages right here, so it's kind of redundant. For offensive line, I do all 3. Defensive line, run stopper. Outside linebacker, pass coverage. Middle linebacker, I'll do run stopper, but every now and then I'll do field general. For cornerbacks, I don't do slot, I just do man and zone. And for safeties, I do zone because it actually buffs their pursuit and tackling and play recognition, which helps them in the run as well. And for kicker and punter, I just do both, whichever one's the weakest link, really.
Don't be overwhelmed when it comes to scouting. I have a simple trick that will help you figure out which positions are your most pressing need. You take the players overall and you divide it by an age. The age is going to give you a number. The lower the number, the more urgent it is that you address that position. The higher the number, the more likely that you probably don't even need to address the position at all, or maybe it can wait to the later rounds or possibly a later year. It's not a foolproof system, but you're going to need pen and paper to write down all 11 starters on defense and either 10 or 11 on offense, depending if you count the fullback. This has really helped me figure out which positions are progressing better than others and which positions need to be addressed immediately. I will say this analytical approach is nice for drafting and scouting, but whatever you do, don't cut your starter just because your backup has a higher number. So now that you have the yearly progression average for 21 or 22 starters, you need to go through and scout. What you need to do is find which starter has the lowest YPA, yearly progression average, and scout his position first. Once you finish scouting all of the draftable players at that position, I don't do undrafted players, but once you finish that position, then move on to the next one and do it in order from lowest average to highest average. That way you're attacking the key positions first. So when it comes to re-signing my players, I always re-sign my starters and I always sign them to a 7-year deal just to get the most cap room possible. But I don't re-sign any of my backups. So you have two choices here. You can either add them to the trade block and let a team organically trade for them, or you can force a trade and get them off your team sooner rather than later, and that way you're guaranteed to get draft picks for them. But be warned, if you force trades like this, you end up having to take the cap hit for the year and also the bonus. So that can get you in cap trouble pretty quickly if you're not careful, but you just have to manage that. Before we get too far, make sure you guys are purchasing upgrades for your coach. What I like to do is I grab the player weekly goal XP upgrade first, the scouting upgrade second, and then third, I will come back and get all the training boosts except the kicker and the punter. That's at the very, very end. So once I've got my offensive and defensive training boost, I then go back and get the master trade one, and then I come back and do kicker and punter. I don't really waste too much time on the retirement package and free agency package. It's just not really my thing. Also, I want to cover a unique scenario. So my left outside linebacker is about to be replaced by a rookie who finally progressed to the same overall. So naturally what I would do, like I said, with the people that you don't want, I'm going to force a trade to get him off my team, but I'm also going to eat the bonus and eat the salary for the year, and that's fine. But this basically ensures that I free up the roster room and moving forward that I don't have to pay him anymore as well. But once you get done trading away your old starter, don't forget to refresh your depth chart so that it updates as well. There's really two approaches when it comes to building your team in the free agency period. I like a win now approach, so I typically sign guys that have a higher overall than my starters, but you might be more inclined to wait on that rookie receiver who's a 75 in hopes that maybe in 2 years he can become an 84 or 83. There's no right or wrong, but one thing I want you guys to remember here, do not overpay for players. If you offer a fair market value contract to somebody and it's a 7-year deal and he's not accepting it, don't go pay him extra 4 or 5 million, because over the next 4 or 5 seasons of you doing that, you will be in some very bad cap situations with no room and you'll lose some pretty good starters. So don't sweat it if a player that you really wanted won't sign with you. Don't overpay him. You can draft a rookie. We're training every single week. It'll be okay. So when you do get that player signed in free agency that you really wanted to be your new starter, you should probably trade away your old starter. You can put him on the trade block and let it happen organically, or you can do what I do and just force trade him off the team, and that way it's done, it's over with, and you don't have to worry about him next year. So we're almost ready to start the draft. One last thing I need you guys to do is go through for your 21-22 starters and refigure their year progression average. This is going to determine which players we draft. So now we're ready to draft. What I do is I go to my scouted list, I add every player that has a true talent of that round or higher, because sometimes you'll be picking in the 3rd round and there'll be like a 2nd round receiver that slipped. I'll add them all to the draft board. Next, what you need to go through and do is if you have any duplicate positions, so say you have like 3 receivers and 2 corners, narrow it down to 1 cornerback that you really like and 1 receiver. And then this will be your list. And what you will do from here is you will go through and refer to your sheet that you just updated and see which position has the worst year progression average of their available draft picks. And right here, I'm narrowing it down and I'm looking at my sheet off screen, and then boom, my number 2 defensive tackle was the worst. So naturally out of that group, I draft the defensive tackle. I do this every single round. I don't really like drafting multiple positions, especially when it comes to receivers and corners, because there's a bunch of them. But if I have, let's say, a receiver and a corner, and I've already drafted a receiver, but my number 2 receiver has a lower YPA than the cornerback, I'll go ahead and draft the receiver because technically I need him more. But sometimes I will forego stacking on positions and I'll go for the cornerback. But I do this for every single round, as you can see. I just go through, I'll add them all to my draft board, I'll look for duplicates and say, which one do I like more? I'll compare 40s and stuff like that and say, okay, I like this guy, get rid of him. And again, I typically just go by the combine grade just for more athleticism. But again, I'll get my list narrowed down, and then I'll start going through, and I'll be looking at my sheet, and I'll compare cornerback to left end. Okay, I need left end more. Okay, I don't need, my number one defensive tackle is better. My number two receiver is better than what I need at left end, and then boom, I decide right then and there I'm going left end. It's a super simple way, and it helps me make sure I'm drafting either current starters or guys that are going to be starters for my team in 1 to 2 years. It's not perfect, but it's what I do. So our last scenario, all your scouted players are gone. What I like to go through and do, I find the best combine grade for every position at a position that I have not picked yet, and I add them all to my draft board. And once I do that, at the very end, it's mostly for me the 6th and 7th rounds, I will pick from that list the highest combine grades, and I'll just round out my draft, picking very athletic players at positions that I haven't drafted yet. And this basically just adds a depth to each of those positions that I probably would have to fill in free agency in the preseason had I not done it this way. One last thing about drafting, sometimes when I go through the way that I do and I'll have all the people added to my draft board, I'll look at it and be like, well, I have a bunch of receivers and tight ends, but I already picked both of those positions already. So those situations you will see me reach a little bit. Maybe it's the 4th round and I really need a right outside linebacker, but he's got a 5th round grade. I'll actually take him around early just to make sure I get him. And like I said, there's a little bit of nuances to this stuff. Feel free to do it how you want to, but this kind of helps me address positions as I need to fill them, and it basically guarantees I get the players that I want, even if I have to reach 1 round earlier. But if you have any questions, comment below, and I'll try to get to them as soon as I can. God bless you. Jesus loves you. Eldest the Great, out.